Episode 4, Expectations and Disappointments. Are you all right? Emma walked over to Alex, looking worried. You are better off without her. You've seen her true nature, and she is not worth being sad over. Don't worry, I'm fine, he said, smiling. After seeing Kathy's behavior, he felt much better about the breakup. Good. Emma's expression brightened. Come on. To celebrate getting away from that bitch, I'll treat you to a meal. Don't argue. How about a nice place somewhere off campus? DeLuca's? DeLuca's was a rather upscale restaurant, and only the richest students at Preston University could afford to eat there. No, not this time. I don't want to bump into Kathy, Alex said, knowing that was the same restaurant she was going to with Billy. But one day I'll treat you to a meal at Chez Laurent. Chez Laurent was one of the most luxurious restaurants in New York. It was the kind of place that all students had heard of, but no one could afford to eat there. Emma was surprised. Alex didn't usually boast, so why was he doing so now? And this particular claim was really over the top. Is this simply a reaction to his heartbreak? She wondered. If so, it'll pass, right? She felt a little embarrassed, but she simply smiled and followed Alex's lead. All right, I'm looking forward to it. To be honest, I've never been there. She didn't know that Alex could eat 3 meals a day at the most expensive restaurant in the world and not even spend 1/100th of his wealth. Emma was called away by 2 of her friends, leaving Alex standing alone. 2 of his classmates, Ben and Carl, walked over and dragged him to the cafeteria for a meal. Just as they reached the entrance of the cafeteria, Ben stopped walking. He stared at his phone and loudly announced, "Shit, Joe's making a fool of himself online. Check out our dorm group chat room." Really? Alex and Carl quickly took out their cell phones and checked the dormitory group chat. Joe had just sent a message. "Guys, it's official. I'm no longer single. Hurry back to the dorm, and I'll treat you to lunch to celebrate." He's finally found a girlfriend. I guess he got tired of being alone, Alex said. Carl grinned. "Let's go back to our dorm and give him hell about it." With that, the 3 of them turned around and walked toward the dormitory. As soon as they entered, they saw Joe sitting on the bed with a girl, holding hands. "You're back." Joe let go of the girl's hand and stood up, smiling at the guys. Joe was a sports major. He was tall and slender with well-developed arm muscles. "Hey guys, this is my girlfriend Susan. She studies music." Then he gestured to Alex and the others. "These are my roommates, Alex, Ben, and Carl." Susan stood up and nodded with a smile. Ben looked at her, and his heart started beating faster. She had pale skin, delicately shaped eyebrows, and a great body. "She's perfect," he thought. "Let's eat at La Bella Vie. Susan's roommates are coming too, so why don't you guys go and get ready?" Joe then turned to Alex and said, "Why don't you bring Kathy along?" Everyone knew about Alex's lack of money, and that he couldn't afford to take his girlfriend to upmarket restaurants, so Joe decided to take this opportunity to help his friend. "We've split up," Alex said bluntly. "Split up? Really?" Joe was shocked. Ben glanced at Joe and he understood the silent message. The reason for the split was obvious: Alex's poverty. "Hurry up." Susan looked at her phone and then raised her head. "My roommates have already left for the restaurant and they're all quite impatient, so don't make them wait too long." "Okay, then you guys get cleaned up and changed and then we can get going," Joe urged them, tugging at Susan's hand. "Come on, let's wait for them outside." Joe stepped outside the dormitory with Susan and turned to see her standing with her arms crossed. "What's wrong?" he asked. She frowned. "Aren't your roommates a little too ordinary looking? I mean, Ben's not very handsome and Carl is somewhat average too. Alex isn't bad, but judging from his clothes, he doesn't have much money. How can I introduce them to my roommates?" Joe felt a little uncomfortable, but he forced a smile and said, "It's just a meal. It's not like it's a blind date or anything, so why do you care so much about their looks?" "Do you think my friends are just coming for the food?" she asked. "I know them. Although they didn't come right out and say it, they're hoping your roommates are good boyfriend material. I've shown them your picture, and they must think that your friends are like you." She frowned. "Then blame me because I didn't tell you they're all biology students." His smile was a little bitter. He'd been assigned to Alex's dorm because the sports department dorms hadn't had room for him. "Why don't you tell your roommates that the meal is canceled?" she suggested. "They'd probably just end up embarrassed if they went." "Cancel it? No. If you canceled now, it would be awkward. Wouldn't that just make things worse?" "Fine then, but I'm not responsible for whatever happens," she pouted. Just then, she received a call from one of her roommates. Susan held her cell phone to her ear. "Rose, you're all there. How was it?" When we get there, you'll see for yourselves." "All right, I'll hurry them up. Just wait." As she was talking, Alex, Ben, and Carl came out of the dormitory. "Joe, see how good I look?" Ben gestured to his half-sleeve shirt as he looked at Joe expectantly. "Cool." Joe smiled and patted his shoulder. Thankfully, Ben hadn't heard Susan try to cancel the lunch. If he had, it would have been a blow to his confidence. Joe looked at Alex, who had followed Ben out. He frowned. "Alex, why haven't you changed?" "What about my friends?" Susan asked. "Can't you get dressed up for them?" "Alex looks fine. What do you expect him to wear?" Carl asked. "He's not Joe, and he's never going to look like him." Susan shook her head. Her roommates were going to be very disappointed. This was going to be a disaster. "Stop wasting time and let's go," she urged them, and they all followed her out of the dormitory. Rose, Stacy, and Betty sat at a table at La Belle Vie. All of them were pretty, and it was clear they came from good families. Rose had long hair that draped over her shoulders. Her skin was fair, and she had a small face with large, sparkling eyes, a straight nose, and pretty pink lips. She looked like a beautiful princess straight out of a fairy tale. She was the prettiest of the three girls, and also the center of attention. "Rose, there's a lump on your forehead. What happened?" Betty gestured to the small bulge on her forehead. "Oh." Rose touched the little mark, her sweet face looking a little angry. "Don't remind me, Betty. Remember how I said I went to Metro Skybank with my father to do some business? Well, I met a clumsy person who smacked a door off my head." "Ouch. Did he at least apologize? Metro Skybank's customers are quite high quality, aren't they?" Rose used her phone to take a picture of her head and then checked it. Thankfully, the lump was not too obvious. She put her phone down and smiled at her friend. "He did apologize. I was a bit stunned when I saw him there. You guys know what kind of people Metro Skybank caters to, right?" "You mean the upper class?" Stacy asked. "So this guy didn't belong?" "Exactly. The Metro Skybank only gives cards to people who have at least $1 million, Rose confirmed. "So he didn't belong there." "Some people think that the poorer a person looks, the richer they are," Betty suggested. "Which means he might be a rich person keeping a low profile. Rose, tell us all about him." Rose rolled her eyes. "Why?" "Later on, when the manager came over, he found out that the guy didn't even have a card. I think he was just an idiot who stumbled into the Metro Skybank. Maybe he thought that the cards of other banks can also be used there." "If he'd done that, I would have died from embarrassment," Stacy exclaimed. "After all that, I didn't even look at him and just left with my dad." Rose tossed her hair over her shoulder. "We'll see if he dares to try it again in the future, or if he dares to show his face anywhere." "The guy's not a child," Betty pointed out. "Doesn't he have any common sense? I guess he's destined to be single for his entire life. Who would want a guy like that?" "Let's stop talking about him. I never saw him again anyway," Rose sighed. Why isn't Susan here with the others yet? Seriously. Rose picked up her phone and frowned slightly as she looked at the screen displaying her chat with Susan. Her boyfriend is rather handsome and quite muscly. Just my type. If one of his roommates looks like that, don't fight me for him, Rose winked. Cheeky, Stacy chuckled. Susan said her boyfriend is a sports major, so he should be pretty fit. We'll see about the others when they get here. The three girls chatted and laughed, checking each other's appearance and making a few adjustments as they waited for the guys to arrive. Finally, Susan, Alex, and the others arrived at La Bella Vie. Episode 5. Oh, he's that loser. You guys go on ahead. I'm going to the bathroom. Alex had noticed some white marks on his clothes, so he went to clean himself up. Ben and Carl had already spotted Rose and the other two girls and had been struck by how beautiful they all were. Ben turned shy, and he began to walk slower, while Carl nervously pushed his glasses higher up his nose. Hi, girls, and what are y'all talking about? What's so funny? Susan asked, smiling as she walked toward her friends. Rose and the other girls looked over, and when they saw Ben and Carl, their smiles froze, and they felt like a bucket of cold water had been tossed over them. Ben's appearance was unremarkable, and Carl seemed just as ordinary. This wasn't what they'd expected. After just a single glance, the girls looked away, seemingly disappointed. Seeing her friends' reactions, Susan flushed with embarrassment. She'd known this would happen. She turned her head and glared at Joe, who could only shrug and smile. Let's sit, Joe said. Carl, why don't you sit next to Stacy? And Ben can sit next to Betty. He had just finished making the suggestion when Stacy got up and moved to sit beside Betty, making it clear she did not want to sit with Carl or Ben. Joe felt bad for his friends. Stacy and Betty chatted on their cell phones, ignoring them, and that just wasn't right. It was downright rude. The table had a total of 4 wooden stools that could each seat 2 people. Stacy and Betty sat together, as did Carl and Ben. Joe sat with Susan, and Rose was alone. Susan and Joe were both concerned. Rose was the prettiest of Susan's roommates, but she was also the pickiest. When Alex came over, how would she react? Alex wasn't bad looking, but he was dressed poorly and wouldn't make a good impression. Joe asked everyone what they wanted to order, and Stacy and Betty focused their attention on the menu, completely ignoring their friends. Why are there only 2 guys here? Are there only 3 people in your dorm? Rose asked Joe as she played with her hair. Oh, one guy went to the bathroom and should be back soon, he replied. Right on cue. He spotted Alex walking toward them, so he stood up and waved him over. Alex, over here. Come and join us. When the girls heard him, they all looked in Alex's direction. Stacy and Betty only took a glance before losing interest, and they went back to studying the menu. Rose's eyes grew wide. A twitch developed at the corner of one eye, and dissatisfaction flashed across her face. Alex also recognized Rose. Keeping eye contact, he walked over to her, confused about why she seemed to hate him so much. When he sat beside her, she stared at him and then snorted softly, giving him a mocking smile. Rose, what's wrong? Susan asked, wondering how Rose seemed to know Alex. Nothing. Rose's smile was cold. She glanced at Alex, then looked at Stacy and Betty. As unlikely as it seems, this is the person who bumped into me at Metro Skybank. This is the guy? Stacy asked, her mouth hanging open. Well, Betty said, it seems like he's still wearing similar clothes. Both girls looked Alex up and down, their expressions disapproving. What are you guys talking about? Susan was still confused. Since Rose didn't seem interested in explaining, Stacy stepped in. Rose went to take care of some business with her father at Metro Skybank earlier, and this guy hit her head with a door, see? Rose has a small bump on her forehead. Betty took over the conversation, glancing at Alex. You can see how he's dressed, and he walked right into the Metro Skybank. You need $1 million to get a card, and yet he went in anyway, and the manager had to challenge him. No doubt he ran out of there with a red face, right? Susan and the others all stared at Alex, imagining how embarrassed he must have been at the Metro Skybank. Susan was quite worried. Rose already seemed to have a poor impression of Alex, so would she want to stay now? She was very direct and wouldn't stay just to be polite. Rose's smile was cold as she looked at Joe and Susan. Susan, I'm glad you found a handsome boyfriend like Joe, but I have something I have to do, so I won't stay. Bye. With that, Rose stood up, turned around, and walked out, even though she'd been the one to suggest this lunch. Joe was really good-looking, and since he was a sports major, she'd assumed that his roommates would be attractive as well. She'd thought that if one of Joe's roommates had been suitable, then it would save her the trouble of having to find a boyfriend her father would approve of. And even if none of them were suitable, she'd still get to meet two handsome men. She'd been surprised when Joe's roommate Ben had looked a bit anxious, and Carl was completely ordinary. Still, she could tolerate the two of them. But when she'd seen Alex, Rose couldn't hold back any longer. He was just a poor loser with no place in the world. The heavens were toying with her. She'd been looking for someone rich and handsome, and the universe gave her someone like Alex who disgusted her. Anger rose quickly. She was so furious that she stormed outside, not paying attention, and bumped into a man's shoulder. He was dressed all in black and looked very professional. His hair was fashionable but neat, and his skin was pale. He held an iPhone in his hand and wore an expensive watch on his wrist. The man's expression turned dark. But then he took a closer look at Rose and noticed how beautiful she was, and his manner changed drastically. Hey, gorgeous, I didn't hurt you, did I? He asked. Would you like me to massage it better? With a wicked grin, the man extended his hand toward her shoulder. Rose was so angry that she lashed out before the man's hand even made contact. She slapped the man's face, and with a frosty expression, she glared at him and snapped, "Watch where you're going." Before he could react, she had already marched out of the restaurant. Joe and the others had been ready to go over to help and were shocked when they saw Rose slap the man. When Rose left, Stacy and Betty decided to leave too, but Susan eventually persuaded them to stay. After lunch, Susan accompanied Joe to pay the bill, and then they left the restaurant. Stacy spoke to Joe and didn't even glance at Alex and the others. Susan was also quite disappointed with Joe's roommates. She was Joe's girlfriend, and she didn't want their relationship to get complicated because of his friends. She was careful to say goodbye to each of them, and then she walked toward the dorm with her best friends. After returning to the dormitory, Joe changed into a new set of sports clothes and dashed to the sports field to participate in training. Ben was lying on his bed, bare-chested, playing with his cell phone, while Carl started up a video game and started playing it. Alex put a card into the Samsung Galaxy phone. If Kathy didn't want it anymore, he may as well use it. He turned it on and it worked quite smoothly. At that moment, Ben shouted excitedly, "Alex, Carl, Minnie's live streaming channel's on. Quick, you need to watch this." Ben had a huge crush on Minnie. She had started a live streaming blog 2 days ago and had even posted about it in the class chat. Almost everyone in the class knew about this blog. Since Alex had nothing better to do, he registered an account and went to Minnie's live streaming channel. She had been streaming live for 20 minutes, and over 30 people were watching it, all classmates. There were no classes in the afternoon, so most people were free to watch it. Minnie hugged a pink pillow and had red earphones in as she chatted in front of the camera. Babes, we haven't had any presents yet. Anyone who has a present for me should let me know. She twirled a lock of her hair around one finger and pouted at the camera, giving an air kiss. Her lips almost touched the screen. She was extremely popular, and quite a few people were secretly in love with her. So whenever she asked for a present, many boys wanted to give her what she asked for. Besides, the gifts weren't too expensive, so the students were able to afford them. The screen flashed with the notification. A necklace from the Morning Star. Then, Captain Reckless has sent the bikini. Thank you, Morning Star, Minnie said, clapping her hands. And thank you, my handsome little captain. I love you. Minnie tilted her head and made a heart gesture with her hands. And just as she finished speaking, a shout came from the corridor. Minnie is so cute, followed by another voice yelling, she's adorable. Ben saw that Minnie was flirting with the people who gave her gifts, and he felt a little jealous, so he nervously chose a gift and pressed the send button. A message popped up on the public screen. Flying Fish has sent a necklace. Ben typed out a message under a screen named Flying Fish. Minnie, it's Ben. I'm watching your live broadcast. Minnie smiled sweetly and spoke into the camera. Thank you, Ben. I know. Minnie spoke to me, Ben mumbled as he floated in a daze. At this moment, another message popped up on the live streaming channel. Ghost Rider typed, Ben, that stingy loser, gave a presentation to Minnie. What a laugh. Can you believe that? Ben's expression changed instantly. Almost everyone from their class was in the chat room. What should I say? He thought. And how can I show my face in class after this? Ben sent an angry message. So what if I'm gifting a present? Have you been eating the poop emoji? Why else would you be talking shit? Ghost Rider responded. Idiot, you're a loser who has nothing, and yet you have money to give presents? Are you planning to sell your kidneys? Or have you been begging your parents for money? You have some nerve. Minnie scowled. People were fighting in the live streaming channel and she didn't like it. Knock it off, guys. If you don't stop fighting, I'll block you. Ben quickly messaged her. Sorry, Minnie, he started it. Ghost Rider sent, Aha, so what if I get in trouble with you? I don't care. Minnie frowned slightly and prepared to block Ghost Rider, but the system notification flashed again in the live broadcast. Ghost Rider has sent a money gun. Minnie stopped in her tracks. Those were worth about $50, and it was the most expensive gift she had received so far.